Hello there, and welcome to Speaking of Our Words, radio programming that brings you the wide range of voices, stories, and forms of local writers, and offering you some insight into their creative process. My name is Chris Deguire. I teach creative writing workshops at Columbia College Chicago, and I am your host. Today we have a studio full of readers today. This will just be a general open mic, so why don't we start off with our first reader, who is Irene Bilak. Hello, Irene.
Hello, Chris.
Irene, what do you have for us today?
I have a historical poem, which is sad, but that is what it was.
All right, Irene Bilak, take it away.
It's called Harvest of Sorrow and Despair. Holodomor, it's called. Starvation killing. Starvation by artificial means of a nation, the Ukrainian nation. Killing by starving of kulak farmers, farmers growing grain, hard-working farmers growing wheat. Confiscate and take to Moscow. Crops belong to Russians. Crops for no one to see. No food for natives of Ukraine. Death to the farmers. Kill the peasants. Kill them all, screamed the Kremlin boldly. Prison and death. People who grow, people who harvest, by force their bread taken. Then there was none, none to gather, none to eat, gone to Moscow, hidden from the starving. Hidden or stolen, Stalin's orchestrations, Stalin's leadership of ruin. Russia rules, no grain for people of Ukraine. Steal a corn cob, banished to jail, banished to the gulags. A people vanishing in death. Bodies bloated, children crying, children dying. Unheard agony of tears and sorrow. Mothers wailing, feed the children, feed the hungry. Do not eat and do not keep. Found a potato, something to eat, something illegal. Confiscate the booty and die. Satan Joe couldn't deport. Too many millions, too many Ukrainians. Starve them all and be done. Reported lies by Durante. There's no starvation, there's no famine in beautiful and bountiful Ukraine. It was Jones who told the truth, who cared enough. Silenced by gun forever. Too late his notes telling the truth, telling the horrors of Ukrainians starving in their own land. Millions famished, families deported, families in agony, the country in tatters, hungry and dying. He met his death, Stalin the conniver, Stalin the torturer, Holodomor famine his doing. Joe Stalin's ultimate solution, genocide of people, genocide of nation, all erased by death from sight. Bodies rotting, empty streets, empty houses, death stalking the land. Wheatland, Ukraine, breadbasket of Europe, breadbasket empty of sustenance, gone with the millions of carcasses. Western world believed, disinformation reported, disinformation to persuade, the staging of happy peasants in their homes. Reporting in New York Times, Durante duped by what he saw. Durante gave erroneous report, blinding readers and their leaders. 1932-33, years of grief, agony and sorrow. Despair for elite and peasant, plight unheard by the West. Now, everywhere memorials abound, monument in Washington, D.C., monuments to never forget, a nation's sorrow, a nation's plea, to remember.
Irene Bilak, thank you very much. There's always just such a grandness to what your stuff is about, whether it's your fiction or your nonfiction or your poetry. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words. And our next reader is Jim Payne. Hello, Jim.
Hiya, Chris.
Jim, what do you have for us today?
I got a couple of very short things. One light white fluff talking to snow, and the second one more somber.
Okay, very good, Jim Payne. Take it away.
Hello, White Stuff. You don't mind if I call you White Stuff, do you? I've never seen you in any other color. You came down this morning like a soft blanket and covered my yard. I like to look out and see you in the yard, White Stuff. You make me feel so pretty. I'm amazed how you get up so high and cover all the roofs with your whiteness. Don't you ever get dizzy? I do sometimes, frolicking in your banks of fluff. What I like to do is lie on my back and swivel my arms and legs until I've made an angel. You see, your beautiful whiteness reminds me of angels with wings. I know some of my friends get pissed at you because they have a hard time getting to work, but that's not really your fault. Too many of them try to get to work at the same time. I know you are only trying to make our outside look pretty. You sure do a nice job. Have you ever thought of being a painter? I'll bet you could make some gorgeous scenery. White Stuff, there's a bunch of guys outside driving plows, and I can hear them cursing at you. But I like you, and you are my friend. I'm just going to stay inside or go stand outside of my porch to enjoy you. Please don't feel bad if some guys don't like you. I do. You are a pretty friend, and I'm glad you come around all winter. By the way, where do you go the other part of the year? Do you go to Alaska? I'm told it is beautiful there all year round. Maybe that's because some of your relatives are always there. You have a bunch of strange relatives. One of them came last month and froze my electrical line, and I didn't have light that night. I can't read in the dark, so please tell them not to do that again. I appreciate you showing a little moderation so we can keep on seeing you. Some of your relatives get pretty wild. That snow you brought us earlier this month was pretty deep. Did you get hung up on some winds or something and stay around too long? I noticed you don't come dressed the same each year. Like today, you are wearing big shiny flakes, but earlier this month you came dressed in tiny little flakes that almost didn't land, they were so light. How do you make them so easily? Most of all, how do you ever make two the same? You never make two the same. You are quite amazing, you know. I would like to ask you not to bunch up like you did over in Afghanistan and then come down the mountain in huge hunks and bury those poor people. They just weren't ready for you. Don't you know they have hardly any plows over there? Please, be a little more careful where you dump the extra. They can only handle so much of it. But don't worry, I like you, and I really enjoy looking out my windows to see how bright and beautiful you sparkle the yard and forest in the back. You know, I just realized I may not see you for several months if you take your vacation now. It is that time of year, isn't it, when you go north and stay up there until December or maybe November. I'll miss you. By the way, how come you make the days so short? I mean, it would be nicer to look out at you all evening. Oh, well, I'm sure you know what you're doing. Maybe you need that extra nighttime to make more snow. Well, I'll enjoy your last banquet and remember your gracious flowing blankets that you cover the yard and roofs with. Please have a nice winter time up north. I'll be waiting for you next fall. By the way, are you responsible for making all those leaves turn such bright colors? If you are more amazing than I realized. White Stuff, bye for now, and thanks for leaving all the water to make the plants and flowers grow. We'll have a lovely summer, and I know you'll be back. It sure is nice to depend on you coming every year. Nothing else in my life is so dependable. You are wonderful. The second piece is a more somber. It's called Afraid. A little boy walking to kindergarten wandered into a grocery store. He wondered if anyone would stop him from looking around. No one came to him, so he walked past the bakery counter smelling the fresh bread. He was hungry, but it didn't seem like there was anything there he could eat. He walked by the fruit stand and looked at the tray full of grapes. Maybe he could eat some of those. After looking around to see if anyone was watching, he reached up and pulled 3 grapes off the bunch. Pretending he was doing nothing, he popped them into his mouth and chewed them gently. He was afraid of making noise. He was afraid of a lot of things. Dogs growling, cars whizzing by, crossing the street. The grapes tasted good, and he wished he had more, but he was afraid to try again. A dozen years later, he walked over to some high school students in the park. No one paid any attention to him, so he went over to a log where a girl was sitting alone. He smelled a nice scent coming from her and moved a step closer to her. When she did not look up at him, he didn't try to start talking to her. He longed to talk to her, but he couldn't. He walked over to the pond and silently said hello to the ducks. No one was listening, and he told the birds, "I like that girl over there." He was afraid of a lot of things. Girls, whether giving him a dull look or a bright smile. He wished he could go back and sit beside the girl on the log. A decade later, he was at a dance with pretty young ladies. Everyone was laughing and having a drink, but no one was coming over to him. He saw an attractive girl he had known from college, so he wandered over to her as if he was only looking for a can of pop. When he asked her if there was any Diet Coke, she said she didn't know and waited for him to continue speaking. He didn't. Talking to girls was scary. He was afraid of a lot of things. Beautiful ladies tied up his tongue, and pretty ones rushed his words away. Maybe he should just look for plain or homely girls. It didn't matter. He didn't know how to ask them out. What would he talk about? 2 decades later, he managed a government office with 16 employees and 2 secretaries. At break time, everyone sat in the lunchroom and gossiped. The pretty blonde secretary asked him what he thought of the new director. She smiled, waiting for his answer. He knew he didn't like this director who bullied him. He was okay with answering her question, but he would have to speak to an attractive woman. He smiled a little and went back to reading nothing in his noontime newspaper. He was afraid of a lot of things. So, one by one, each decade added 10 more years to his life with no companion. Every night, he eats grapes and dreams of talking to women.
There's always a sense of grandness about your pieces as well, too, Jim. And what I really enjoyed about that first piece was the sense of address and the engagement that brings, this sort of letter that you're writing. And then in this piece, you know, it's that sort of that voice. It's almost like a community voice that's telling that story. Very engaging. I don't think that's really somber at all. I don't know if somber is the right word, but there's definitely something, I think, grand going on there. So Jim Payne, thank you very much. Our next reader is Mary Jean Clark. Hello, Mary.
Hi.
Mary, what do you have for us today?
It's sections of a book started. We have a group of 3 of us, and this one is about vampires, zombies, and werewolves.
Yeah, we're getting a little close to Halloween here, so right on schedule here. All right.
Okay.
Mary Jean Clark, take it away.
Chapter 1, Screamer Box. Joe, make sure you grab a good box this time. Last time you grabbed a mute, said Bedeau. Bedeau was older than Joe. Yeah, I will, replied Joe. Joe hated checking the screamer box. Just the idea of hearing the zombie baby scream traveled up his spine and gave him werewolf hair. Zomunity used zombie baby screamer boxes with zombie babies in them, to lure zombies into the herder trailer. Zomunity needed replacement zombies for all kinds of tasks. They used them to pull the plows, to pull wagons, and most importantly, put the zombies on treadmills to generate electricity. Joe disliked being on shift with Bedeau. It was like being married, and Joe had been married 4 years already. It was a far longer time than it seemed on paper. That quickly yellowing paper with his signature on it. "I ain't married to you," shouted Joe. "You wish, at least you'd be getting some," cajoled Bedeau. "Which gate we going to use today, Mrs. Bedeau?" joked Joe. "Let us head to the south gate," said Bedeau, "and don't open the screamer box where the hitching team can hear it. You know how it sets them off." Bedeau was working on hooking up the zombie pulling team. Since the zombies could not unfasten the yokes and hitch reins, the yokes and reins were left on all the time or until a zombie could no longer pull. Bedeau wondered about the time before zombies were used to pull trailers. What was used to pull trailers? Humans? Surely not vampires. One man steered and braked the wagon, and one man walked in front of the zombies to get them to pull. Zombies walked toward the closest human. They were hungry after all. Joe checked his shoelaces. He knew he would be walking. Darn Bedeau. The second chapter is Feast. "Feast," yelled Bedeau, but it was too loud with the screamer, and the other zombies coming into the herding trailer were none too quiet. Joe did not even look his way. "Feast. There's a feast getting into the trailer," Bedeau tried again. "Darn," said Bedeau. He moved quickly to flip close the lid on the screamer. The zombie baby in the box immediately shut up. They had to get the feast out of the trailer, and soon. You never knew how long they would last. Bedeau grabbed a prodder stick that leaned up against the trailer. He could no longer see the feast. The herding trailer packed quickly today. "Joe, we got a feast." Joe turned from the gate for a second. He had already started sliding the gate shut. The trailer was packed and more were trying to crowd in. Some days you could barely get enough to man the treadmills, but today a packed house. And of course, a feast. Joe started to walk towards Bedeau. "Where?" responded Joe. "I lost track of him. Shorter, of course. There, I think, in the bluish shirt." "Crap," said Joe. Joe and Bedeau started using their prodder sticks to try to get the feast to the rear of the trailer and back out of the end gate. But the trailer was truly packed, and while they had gotten some of the zombies to move, the zombies did not move in an organized manner. Finally, a teenage zombie in a blue shirt was against the outside wall of the trailer near the two workers. Joe and Bedeau continued prodding the teen and the other zombies through the slat walls of the trailer. They were making some progress. Another few feet and the teenage zombie would be by the gate. The fatal exploding acne syndrome teenager, Feast, did exactly what feasts do. It exploded. And through the slat openings, it exploded all over Joe and Bedeau. Everyone in the Zomunity knows there are no good teenage zombies, and there is no coping with them. Baby zombies will live a long time. Middle-aged zombies will live a long time. Everyone lives a long time, but teenage zombies, when they hit puberty, explode like a squeezed pocket. You do not want to be around it. You do not want to see it. You do not want to smell it. And now Joe and Bedeau are covered with a feast. Another one? Okay, chapter 3 is Monster Tech. And welcome to another episode of Monster Tech, brought to you by the makers and weavers of werewolf coats. Wolfies, where we don't bite, we just wear on you. All right, said Joe. He dashed to the kitchen, grabbed a beer, and lit in his chair just as the pre-commercials were rolling up. What's it going to be tonight? Joe said to the empty walls. The wife had her quilting night tonight, so the place was his, and so was the television station. No Televampirio tonight. The two hosts were Michael, the older fellow with a mostly British accent, unless he forgot, and Jill, a mostly blonde, and posed to ask the questions no one could possibly think of. Joe was the slime catcher, of course. Tonight's episode, started Michael, deals with something we have heard about only once before. And what is that? Interrupted Jill, now the recipient of a glance from Michael. This is a classic, thought Joe, stretching out for the half hour of fun and beer. Well, I'm glad you asked, Jill. Tonight we're observe and explore OCD and zombies. Sounds like fun, Mike. When do we start? Guffaw, guffaw, went Joe. As our watchers may remember, we had a footage of a werewolf OCD. The werewolf was combing his hair exactly 100 times. That's a lot, Mike. Well, it's a lot at one time, Jill, but I'm sure it's not too much for you. You are so funny, Mike. We have observed and filmed OCD and werewolves, but wait until you see the footage we have tonight of zombies. We have actual footage of a zombie repeatedly washing its clothes. I don't think you're going to believe this one, Jill. I'm sure I will, Mike, said Jill as she brushed the hair away from her mouth. I believe lots of stuff, Mike. I even believe in magic wands. Hold on that story for our next episode, Jill. Now on to the footage. Joe was practically falling out of his chair. This one's funny. Okay. Chapter 4, Vampire White. Is there a reason you did not understand me when I said I wanted vampire white for the wall? Stated the mayor's wife, Maggie. We were, started the lead painter. So you do have a grasp of the English language. I was afraid the paint fumes were too much for you. And by the way, that was not a question, said Maggie. The mayor's estate represents all his citizens, and this wall is to be vampire white, continued Maggie. The room was currently decorated with drop cloths and two horrendous painters, and of course the mayor's wife, wearing what she considered her active wear. Her staff and workers regarded her current outfit as her bratty princess looking for her tiara outfit. One of her kitchen staff actually kept a fake crown in a large serving bowl for days like this. And those brushes you are using better be first moon werewolf hair, or the whole wall will show streaks. You do understand the importance of this, do you not? Questioned Maggie. We certainly do, ma'am, started the lead painter, and the brushes were provided by, again he was cut off. This is supposed to be done this morning and ready for this night's party. I will be back before the dinner party starts. You need to bring a vampire in so I can be sure you got the right color. At 10 minutes prior to 8 that night, Maggie returned to the yet-to-be-completed room. She was dressed in a low-cut white gown. The two painters were still there. They were accompanied by a vampire. Ah, at least you were smart enough to take my advice, stated Maggie. The vampire was making direct eye contact with Maggie. He seemed very put out at having to be there. Now then, back up against the wall. Let's compare those colors, Maggie said as she approached the vampire on the wall. Raise your arm, please, so I can see the colors better. Excellent. See? Said Maggie over her shoulder to the painters. This is the color we need, and this is the color I shall have. The vampire leaned in just a bit and appeared to whisper in Maggie's ear. She turned, making eye contact again with the vampire. She was now enthralled. She stood still for a moment as the painters were hanging their heads, waiting for the next tongue lashing. Dear, you are a little late tonight, said the mayor. And what is that on your white dress, that red spot? Yes, dear, said the wife, looking vacantly at the blank wall. Well, this certainly is different, thought her husband, the mayor. Maybe she really is starting to change.
All right, Mary Jean Clark, thank you very much. Very funny. Very funny. Something you do with that overall storyteller voice. Very engaging. Very engaging. Well, thank you very much. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words, and next up is Darleen Coleman. Hello, Darleen.
Hi, Chris.
Darleen, what do you have for us today?
I brought a pocket full of poems.
All right, Darleen Coleman, take it away.
Okay. This first one is called For Cynthia in Bloom. Somewhere hidden in the cosmos, beneath the bridal veil, Jack in the pulpit gazes upon Lily in the valley as he marries wild Violet to that creep, Charlie. Nestled beside bleeding hearts, tulips touch, willow weeps, buttercups melt. Last year's bachelors are buttoned tight as primroses. Brave Fern, meanwhile, unfurls her nautilus shoots straight into baby's breath, which smells of goat's beard. As robin egg sky cracks open, spilling sustenance on thirsty trillium. Ever so slowly, Cynthia rises like steam from her hot bed, ablaze with the spring fever of love, to greet dawn's explosion of crimson scattered on clover, seeping through her sheer curtains, causing her lily-white robe to blush rose at the sight of a maiden in bloom. And this next one is called Mine. The old woman stands at the curb ecstatically claiming the junk pile. Yesterday someone moved, left remnants spread across the grass. She has dibs. A faded blue pickup cruises the block. The man and his Chevy have seen better days. Through the rolled-down window the driver leers. The woman reaches to touch the edge of the pile. This, everyone knows, is junker's etiquette. Her claim has been staked. Now back off. She thinks the man's stupid, plenty old enough to know the rules of picking. She got here first. Still, he has the wheels. All ears perk at the screeching orange refuge truck, belching and lurching down the street, adding yet another contender to the fight. Mine, the woman shouts, her fists in balls. The pickup driver flicks his cigarette onto the pile of junk, spits in her direction, and laughs. The orange grinder pulls alongside them. A skinny man springs from the door like a choreographed dancer and shouts, "Hey, move your truck, and you," he points at the old woman. "Better get out of the way. I have work to do, and this here is mine." The pickup driver sputters away, cursing. The woman wraps her arms around herself as if she's an ancient oak about to be felled, and a hippie tree hugger all rolled into one. The refuse driver shrugs and jumps back into the orange truck. There are many stops on his route, and he wants to be home for jeopardy. Arms laden with junk, the woman's walk home is slow but sweet with victory. And this one is called As I Age. The tectonic plates of my youth are shifting. Bits of everything I eat get stuck in my teeth, even ice cream, if things are in it, other than ice and cream. Spring sweeps clean the convolutions in my brain, ferreting out that which no longer serves me, sorting and tucking, saving, deep into the gray folds, only love. It would have been more helpful in my youth, but I have finally learned to say no. These days I've little to decline, save health. I embrace my shrinkage, the expanding spaces between teeth. I can take long as I want to chew now, or spit out random thoughts to strangers waiting behind carts in the 20 or less lane, explaining the sign should say fewer. The bones in my back are porcelain thin as teacups. Bits of cartilage float into streams of consciousness. An IV drip into daydreams of stooping to reach the lower shelf or sitting on the floor, able to get back up without creaking. I say thank you now willingly. It never would have occurred to me when the road ahead stretched farther than the path behind. My vision attuned now to the space between shadows and light. Coffee, newspapers, tea, mail. Time enough now to count stars, to stay late, enjoy the fireworks, a glass or two of Merlot before sleep. I don't have to get up early for work the next day, but will. The tectonic plates of my youth are shifting. Thoughts can't be held in place for long. Layers of mind rubble flow like lava. Even words, long buried in caves, are unstoppable. And this one is called Words. Voices caress or bruise you purple as rocks. Secrets slip past lips, skid across mean streets, slam into tender ears, stinging like nettles. Words burrow like chiggers, slice deep into soft hearts not born brittle. Scars shrink, harden over time, no use for thick skin or reason. They'll fail you every time. Words have the power to whisper sweet nothings or scald you alive. And this one is called My Aunt's House. As a child, I was happiest when my mother and I walked to the green and white house on Maplewood Street, leaving our third-floor apartment on raucous Western Avenue with its concrete yard empty, save for 5 smelly, rusted steel garbage cans. We walked for blocks and blocks and blocks until enveloped in a sweet cloud of freshly cut grass. I found a secret hiding place, a nest in the middle of converged bushes, where, mantled in the perfume of lilacs and peonies, I sat cross-legged, thinking about things. My cousin's shouts drew me out to witness a sparrow sprawled on the sidewalk. We scattered across the yard, scouring the ground for worms, while my mother fed him whiskey with an eyedropper, because it had worked for Billy, our parakeet. When his weightless body went cold, we wrapped him in layers of tissue and laid him gently in the center of an empty shoebox tied with ribbon cut from Tommy's balloon. We had a procession then, my mother, my aunt, my cousins, all marching solemnly around and around the bushes, before digging a hole with my uncle's shovel. We all looked up to see the freed balloon blending right into the sky. In the sun, peonies loosened their tight-fisted balls, shedding soft pink petals I held against my cheek to wipe away the tears. Later, I examined the big ants that roamed the flowers, dark and shiny as my Sunday school shoes. Head, thorax, abdomen. Naming the parts made me feel solid. It was good to understand some things. When it grew dark, my cousins and I chased fireflies, transforming jelly jars into magic lanterns. Crickets sang loud nighttime songs as birds slept in nests I couldn't see, but imagined, safe and warm, as my aunt's house on Maplewood Street. I have one more, and this one actually is part of an art piece that I did for a show at Artworks called, the show was called The Writings on the Wall, and every entry of visual art had to be accompanied by some kind of text graphics. So it's called Shadow Self, and I sold it. Shadows follow you like bad juju, memories, guilt, regret, sorrow, fear, anger, if only. The path not taken creeps up behind you, whispers over your shoulder. Perhaps you should have veered right, turned the corner, jumped off that cliff, crossed the river, run through those woods. Shadows cling like wet paper to bathroom ceilings, render you weak-kneed, distraught, speechless, even in your dreams, especially in your dreams. Dreams of trying to run with leaden legs, of being caught in a riptide, of your feet caked with cement, of the air thick as gauze. You carry the shadows around in your pocket like rocks you found on the beach. Some are sharp and make your fingers bleed as you grasp them. Some are smooth, round stones that comfort until you find you have amassed so many they weigh you down. Stones you swallow just to keep something down to ground you. These too turn against you. Just when you've begun to trust their solidity, they dissolve. These bits and pieces that cling, that will not let go, these hangers-on merge with you. You will drag your shadow self around from place to place, and wherever you go, there it will be. Only know this, there can be no shadows without light.
What I really enjoy about your work, Darleen, is the details you give to the conditions of all of your characters. I mean, very, very detailed. It's not like a detail of the human condition. It's like the details of each of your characters' conditions. You do that so well. So, Darleen Coleman, thank you very much. All right, next up is going to be Ron Larson. So, hello there, Ron.
Hey, Chris.
Ron, what do you have for us today?
Okay, so I have the first part of the first half of Chapter 3 of this book I'm writing on Wisconsin and the Civil War. So I think I read Chapter 1 a couple months ago.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I believe you did, yes.
So this is Wisconsin's first response to the firing at Fort Sumter.
All right, Ron Larson, take it away.
News of the firing on Fort Sumter reached Wisconsin on April 13th, 1861. The response was electric. In Kenosha, the Weekly Telegraph reported that the news created an excitement never equaled, and that treason and rebellion must be met and crushed at once. The secessionists have precipitated the war, the newspaper charged, and they will be held responsible for the consequences before the civilized world. While many Democrats in Wisconsin supported President Lincoln in the use of force after Fort Sumter, not all did. Beriah Brown, the Democratic editor of the Daily Milwaukee Press and News, foreshadowed the partisan divide that was to grow in the coming months and years. He argued that the Northern people were made victims of an unreasoning element in the Republican Party that demanded war, and that the Lincoln administration, quote, inaugurates war to save the party from dissolution. On April 15, 1861, President Lincoln called for 75,000 state militia to serve for 3 months. Wisconsin was asked to provide 1 regiment. The following day, Governor Randall issued a proclamation offering opportunities to all existing militia companies for enlistment. Although Governor Randall and others had tried to ready their state forces before the conflict, they were ill-prepared. William Utley, the Wisconsin Adjutant General, whose job it was to prepare Wisconsin's militia in 1861, wrote that it would be impossible to imagine a more defenseless state of things than existed in the free states at the breaking out of this rebellion. Not only was there the question of raising the men to form the regiment required, but there was the question of who was to lead them. Utley appreciated the necessity of a thorough knowledge of military tactics, but was unwilling to believe that it was necessary that a man should have graduated from a military school in order to lead the soldiers. Some of the most useless and practical creatures in the Army, he noted, are graduates at West Point. A military education was of great value to a person with a sound practical mind, he thought, but was of no great use to a vain, conceited coxswain. He believed that to bring out the best portion of our citizens as volunteers, it was necessary for an influential citizen who had the confidence of the community call upon his neighbors to rally under his banner. In this way, a company would be raised within a small circle who would stand by each other as neighbors and friends. The experience of the next 4 years would largely prove him correct. Within days of Randall's call, militia companies from across the state offered their services. The Kenosha Telegraph reported that all over the North and West the utmost enthusiasm prevails, and that volunteering was going on everywhere. The most difficult question, the editor thought, was which of the numerous companies offering shall be accepted. Because the militia system drew from all classes of society, Utley felt it formed, quote, an army of intelligence such as never before been seen upon the earth. In the ranks, he argued, you could find men competent to perform any act known in mechanism or art. Within 10 days of Randall's call for volunteers, He had enough for 5 regiments. Illinois, with slightly more than double the population of Wisconsin, was asked to supply 6 regiments by the War Department. Wisconsin was asked for only 1. This caused Governor Randall extreme dissatisfaction. He felt it was disproportionate and unfair. Randall wanted 7 regiments to be fully trained and equipped, with the emphasis on trained. The men sent to war should be soldiers when they go, he warned. Otherwise, there will be few of them living soldiers when it is time for them to return. Organizing the 1st Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry Regiment, however, demonstrated the state's lack of preparedness and resulted in embarrassments. There has never been an efficient military organization in the state, the governor noted, and the men who had experience were very few or almost entirely unknown. The proper way to equip and train soldiers for rugged war were mysteries, he wrote, the solution of which could only be found by actual experiment. 2 scenes that took place in Beloit and Kenosha were repeated across the state as militia companies left for training. In Beloit, the Beloit City Guards were assigned to be Company F of the 1st Wisconsin. Their departure was described in the local newspaper. Never did the city witness such a spectacle as upon the departure of the Beloit City Guards for their rendezvous at Milwaukee. The entire population of the city and many persons from the adjacent country assembled to witness the embarkation of the 1st Company from Rock County. The streets were thronged with people, and every available position in the vicinity of the depot was occupied by spectators. The rooms and platform of the depot were occupied by the relatives of the soldiers that were to leave. The time for the departure of the train having arrived, the company was ordered aboard, and hasty words of parting were exchanged between husbands and wives, mothers and sons, sisters and brothers. The scene at this moment was most touching and solemn. Stout hearts melted, and eyes, unused to weep, were suffused with tears. In Kenosha, the send-off was a little more formal. On the afternoon of April 25th, a large crowd, including 34 young women wearing colors representing all the states of the Union, assembled at a park near Lake Michigan. They were to present the Park City Grays, Kenosha's militia company, with a flag. The ladies of our city made a very rich and elegant flag for the Park City Grays. About 4 o'clock, the company marched into the park, which was already filled with a large concourse of citizens. The ladies and speakers took a raised platform, while the exercises were opened by a very eloquent and appropriate prayer by Reverend J.T. Matthews. Mrs. F.S. Lovell presented the flag to the Park City Grays with a short, patriotic speech. The flag was received on the part of the company by Colonel Lane, and some appropriate remarks. The band then played the Star-Spangled Banner, after which there were 3 cheers for the ladies of Kenosha. The next day, carrying the flag ahead of them, the Park City Grays, assigned to become Company G of the 1st Wisconsin, marched to the railroad station and boarded a train for Milwaukee. The 10 companies that made up the 1st Wisconsin rendezvoused at Camp Scott in Milwaukee, which is named after General Winfield Scott, General-in-Chief of the U.S. Army. The newly established camp on the fairgrounds did not exist. There were no barracks, so the volunteers were put in public buildings, halls, and hotels. When enough barracks and mess halls were built, the troops moved in. But the environment still took on a carnival-type atmosphere, with soldiers receiving large numbers of visitors. The soldiers were also without weapons or regimental uniforms. The uniforms, if they had any, were the company militia uniforms, all different from each other. As Adjutant General Utley wrote in his year-end report, "We have had no trouble to get men. The trouble has been to sustain them and to fit them out for service." Wanting to get uniforms as quickly as possible, the governor and Wisconsin's Quartermaster General, William T. Treadway, ordered cloth from different suppliers and had the uniforms made as quickly as possible. The militia tradition in Wisconsin, like many other states, was to have gray uniforms. As a result, the first 8 Wisconsin regiments initially wore gray uniforms, the same color adopted by the Confederacy, which Randall and the other state officials were unaware of. Because of the cloth for the uniforms was purchased from different companies, it had differing shades of gray, and the coats and pants varied in color. This gave, quote, a somewhat unique appearance when the regiment was on parade. Although the regiment had no weapons, Colonel John C. Starkweather, the Milwaukee militia officer in command, conscientiously drilled his men, trying to ready them for the battlefield. While still encamped in Milwaukee, the first soldier died. On June 3, 1861, John Monroe, a private and company sea, went for a swim in the Milwaukee River. He reportedly stepped into a hole and drowned. He was Wisconsin's first death in the Civil War.
What I really like about your stuff, Ron, is how you blend all of this history and all this research that you've done, but how it just comes through so very strongly in your own voice. Yeah, very nice. Ron Larson, thank you very much. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words, and our next piece right now is from regular contributor Richard Bell, who cannot be here with us again today, and this is the next installment of his story, The Dinosaur Returns. I will be reading Richard Bell's piece playing the parts of the narrator, Scooter, Biff, and Scooter's mom. Here we go. And now, the further adventure of Scooter and Biff, two boys with overactive imaginations. This morning we find them at the mobile home of Scooter's mom, an unemployed psychic, as they enter and stare at the cookie jar. "Hey, Mom, can we have some cookies?" Scooter yells. "No, it's almost supper time and you'll ruin your appetite." "I don't have an appetite," Biff states. "What? Listen, smarty pants, I predict that your mouth is going to get you in trouble one of these days. I swear you boys will be the death of me yet. Now get." The boys run outside and the screen door slams. "Hey, your mom made a prediction," Biff says. "It wasn't about cookies, so shut up about my mom," Scooter replies. They walk around aimlessly for a while and then go to the large cardboard box that doubles as their spaceship/time machine, parked behind the trailer, and enter. "I say we fly around and look for cookies. I wonder if the grocery store throws them away when they get old," Scooter says. Curious, the ship lifts up into the air and the boys fly over the neighborhood and land behind the grocery store. "I bet there's some cookies in this dumpster," Scooter says. As they approach, they hear a growling sound. Scooter gives Biff a lift and he looks inside the dumpster. "He's here, my T-Rex from our last adventure, and he's eating all the old food, including our cookies. I think he's almost big enough to shoot, so I can mount his head over my bed as a trophy," Biff shouts. Scooter replies, "I know that's been your dream ever since we watched Jurassic Park together, our favorite movie of all time. We need some rope so we can lead it back to our ship." The boys search around and find some plastic rope and make a lasso, which they throw into the dumpster for what seems like hours and eventually catch the dinosaur around the neck. They both pull on the rope and hoist it out, and it pukes on the ground in front of them. "I think we should give him a name," Biff says. "You mean like Steven?" "Maybe more like Barfy," Biff replies. They struggle to drag him back to their ship and then take off for home. Barfy starts nudging Scooter with his nose and won't leave him alone. "Ha! He likes you. I bet he thinks you're his mom," Biff observes. Once back home, they drag him under the trailer and tie him to the water pipes. Biff says, "I remember your mom predicted we would be the death of her. Maybe it happened, and we can finally get some cookies." The boys run inside, and Scooter yells, "Mom, are you dead yet? We want some cookies." Mom replies, "I thought I told you boys to go outside and play. You've been gone less than 5 minutes, and here you are again. Now get out, both of you, before you get your butts paddled all the way to the moon." "The moon is pretty far away, you know," Biff says. "Oh, wise guy, eh? Listen, I got pieces of kids like you in the trunk of my car." And they all laugh. Scooter says, "Come on, Biff, let's go out and play in traffic." He opens the back door, and they leave, and the door slams behind them. "And quit slamming that screen door," Mom yells. Next month, the T-Rex steals their spaceship/time machine. Thank you very much to Richard Bell. All right, and we've got a little bit of time left here, so I am going to read a couple of pages here, excerpt from the book that I've been reading from for the past, I don't know how many shows it seems, my worst summer job book in progress, Turn of the Century. This is a scene that takes place probably I think, about 2/3 or so of the way into the book. The main character here is Jason, high school senior, plays on the football team. It is October-ish of 1999, and the game that they just got done playing is with their school's sister city in Stevens Point. They make a road trip to Stevens Point one year, and the next year Stevens Point comes down to Kenosha and plays. So what happens while the team is there is they stay with the families of players in the other cities. So right now, Jason is staying with the family of Mike Hughes. So we'll just go for a couple of pages here. So, do you have a girlfriend back in Kenosha? Mrs. Hughes asked from the front seat of the minivan. They were parked at some Italian restaurant where they were ordering food for delivery. Jason smiled. Could he say it? Yeah, he could. He had a girlfriend. Yes, I do, he answered, trying to sound confident about it. His hands rested on the top of his duffel bag, wedged between his legs. There was plenty of room in the back to fit in between Mike and his sister. Susan, was that her name? He couldn't remember. At that moment, Mr. Hughes, a big, broad-shouldered man, returned and climbed in, smelling of garlic. 45 minutes, he bellowed, starting up the vehicle. To Jason, he seemed nice. Loud, but nice. His dad used to be loud like that, especially when he and Michael were kids. Good, Mike said. I'm hungry. Mr. Hughes backed out and entered traffic, asking, So what are you all talking about? Someone has a girlfriend, piped up the youngest from the front seat. Jason couldn't remember her name at all. Who does? Mr. Hughes asked in a playful tone as he turned a corner. The little girl turned a little and pointed to the back seat, her finger waggling. Susan? Mr. Hughes asked, still in a silly tone. No, the girl giggled. Mike? No. She laughed harder as Mrs. Hughes, whom Jason also noticed was tall, at least taller than his mom, playfully slapped her husband's shoulder, asking, So what's her name, Jason? Courtney, Jason answered, feeling excited to tell these nice but complete strangers his girlfriend's name. Did you take her to homecoming? She asked, half turned to look at him. Our homecoming isn't until next week. So's ours, Mike said, although to Jason he didn't sound too thrilled about it. Did you get her a corsage? Mike's mom asked, smiling that mom smile that Jason hadn't seen in a while with his own mother. We got a floral shop in the grocery store I work at. Can't wait till the last minute for these things, Mr. Hughes said, glancing in the rear-view mirror at the kids, especially his son. Dad, Mike said softly. Jason immediately sensed some tension, and everyone fell silent for a moment. Even the little girl turned to face the front. Finally, the older sister, Susan, spoke up, but quietly. What color's her dress? I don't know. Jason turned to look at her, sitting stiff up against the side, as if trying to shrink back into the seat. Even though she was younger than Mike, she seemed just as tall. Well, not tall, long. She won't tell me, so I'm just getting her a white mini carnation wrist corsage. The floral lady said that'll go with almost any color dress. Sounds very nice, Mrs. Hughes said. They drove for a little while longer down a quiet residential area. Thankfully, they soon pulled into their driveway and into the garage. Is she cute? Susan asked as they all climbed out. Jason waited till she got out last and answered, Yeah, really cute, which made Susan smile and blush, so she turned and slid the side door closed. And I'm going to hold it off right there. So, all right, well, I want to thank all of our readers who were here today with us. We had Irene Bilak, Jim Payne, Mary Jean Clark, Darleen Coleman, and Ron Larson. And special thanks to Richard Bell for his contributing piece. This show is a production of the Kenosha Writers Guild. If you have any questions or comments or wish to participate in this program, please visit KenoshaWritersGuild.com and come to one of our meetings. The Kenosha Writers Guild meets the third Thursday of every month over at Carthage College here in Kenosha. Please check the website for details as to where the room location is. Right now, I believe they are in the Strauss building. Room 196, I believe, is the room. These meetings are free and open to the public, and you can bring some stuff that you're working on and read from it if you want and to get some feedback, or you can just come and listen and just see what goes on. And every second Thursday of the month, the Kenosha Writers Guild hosts either a visiting writer or a contributor or in-depth critiques of your work. So please check the website. Again, that is KenoshaWritersGuild.com for more details. Please visit the Facebook and YouTube pages for this show, Speaking of Our Words, and please feel free to leave a comment. Thank you to Dave Cole, Troy McDonald, and WGTD, Steve Brown and Nita Hunter, Lisa Adamowitz-Kless, and the Kenosha Writers Guild. Thank you very much again to all of our guests. This is Chris Deguire, and The World Needs Your Stories. We will see you again. Thank you for listening.